I recently read an article confirming Indonesia's entry into BRICS. While we see many nations apply for the BRICS membership, I wonder how long will the bloc survive and be relevant, considering there's no consensus between the top three nations, India, Russia, and China, with respect to issues like de-dollarization and so on. China wants to use an alternative BRICS currency to further its national interest and grow its economy, which can be a threat for India. If China grows stronger, isn't it a threat for Russia as well? How do you see the future of this bloc in the coming decades? And can RIC, Russia, India, China, this trilateral bloc, if formed officially, can RIC handle the sole superpower, which is the US? Is the US is the US powerful enough to counter the RIC together? Is the US immune to any threat? Okay, let's first talk about BRICS, then we'll talk about RIC. But the two questions are definitely correlated. So Indonesia has apparently entered into BRICS. I haven't seen the news, but let's say it's true. Okay, or why don't we just Google it? So let's Google it. Okay, one second. Let us Google it. Indonesia BRICS. Indonesia defense branch. Okay, it has officially become the first Southeast Asian. Okay, all right. So it's clear that Indonesia has indeed joined BRICS. Very good. I'm happy to hear this. So a lot of nations want to join BRICS. You're right, and you're also right in asking how long could this bloc survive and be relevant, because there's no significant consensus between the top three nations, Russia, India, China. On various matters. So now we have to understand, why was this grouping formed in the first place? It was created as an economic grouping. See, the West has been dominant the past 5 centuries. And now there are the older economies, the older civilizations are rising again, India and China essentially. Russia is also an Eastern civilization, not Western. So it's kind of the East coming together in some sort of way to try and find some way to cooperate economically. There's a BRICS Bank, BRICS Development Bank, and so on. There's various organs or organizations that have been set up to take this cooperation forward, to act as vehicles that take this cooperation forward. So BRICS is kind of, it is definitely not a strategic alliance. It's not a military alliance. It's not even an alliance. It's just a coalition of nations, and it's an economic coalition of nations. And you could say sort of that it emerged as a response to the Western hegemony of the world for 5 centuries. In reaction to the Western hegemony, that's the context, and in reaction to India, China, Russia again re-emerging as powers. So when it comes to economics, China is the biggest economy of the three RIC, of the BRICS economies. India is the second largest of the BRICS economies, and Russia is probably the third largest. If you cut out lots of extraneous factors and look at just the bare bones definition of GDP, then Russia could be in the top 3. There you have that, right? So there are issues, of course, like you say, between India and China, between China and Russia, and so on. And obviously the Chinese, every nation prioritizes its own self-interest. When you're in BRICS, you want to extract some value out of BRICS for your own self-interest, and every nation sees BRICS in this way. So it can only work when there's synergy between the top 3 nations. So how long could BRICS last? I think BRICS will last significantly long, because there is a common adversary or threat when it comes to economics and other matters, vis-a-vis, with respect from the perspective of the East. So when it comes to Russia, India, China, we have a common adversary of sorts. Well, from the Indian perspective, you could not really say that the US is an adversary, but their actions are anything but friendly. And their actions have been anything but friendly the past 3 or 4 years. The US, they've used all kinds of pressure tactics against India. They've tried to tarnish India's image in so many different ways. They've tried to arm twist India in so many ways. They're currently arm twisting India when it comes to delivery of fighter jet engines and so many other things. So the relationship isn't good anymore between India and the US, and it's because India's status as a growing economy, and the US doesn't want India to end up becoming the next China in the next 20, 30 years. So that's why they're trying to clamp down from right now itself. So that's why you could say that the US is behaving like an adversary to India. So from that perspective, India, China, Russia have kind of common ground to work towards, right? So as long as the US is a hegemon, a global hegemon, a superpower, a very powerful nation, BRICS will continue to exist. Unless there's a war, very unlikely war between India and China or China and Russia, which is extremely unlikely. I mean, how stupid it would be for India and China to go to war, or China and Russia to go to war. India and Russia, there's no chance of a war, no chance in hell of a war. But China, India, and China, Russia are the historical flashpoints. But it makes sense for these countries to work together. So I see BRICS remaining relevant for a few decades at least, for a few decades, at least a decade. 100% a decade, and it's really attractive. The BRICS economy, cumulative economy, is greater than the G7 economies now, which is why nations are really interested in joining. That's why Indonesia wants to join, and so many other nations want to join. They're all queuing up, so it makes sense. So I think BRICS will remain relevant for a few decades. Now about RIC. If RIC actually becomes a military coalition, let's say, okay, well, that's like hell freezing over, or the sun rising in the east. But let's say RIC becomes a military coalition, an actual military alliance. Then can it handle the sole superpower? You understand, if you want to become a military alliance, you have to work out all kinds of extremely complicated and confounding details. If we are a military alliance, do we pool our armed forces together? Who controls the armed forces? Who commands the armed forces? Where does the command center lie? A lot of details that are extremely prickly. But let's say it happens. Okay. So what that means is that you simply take the hard power score of each of the three nations and add it together into a single hard power score. So what Russia is about, what is it? Let's say it's 50. China is 17 and India is 4.9. So 60 plus 17 is 77 plus 4.9 is 81, 81, 82. And the US is about 94. So that makes it very similar to the US. The hard power of RIC plus versus US, it's still less than the US, but it is not far away. So it's 84 versus 82 versus 94, just a difference of 12 points. So that would make it a significant challenger to the US. But it would need to have a single uh, power center. You can't have decentralized power centers. Otherwise, if you have that, then it doesn't work properly. You don't have the agility and the speed of decision making that you would want. You would have to do decisions by consensus, which never works. Uh, so if RIC is formed, then it could really genuinely counterbalance the US. The US is still going to be more powerful than RIC put together, but it will be a genuine means of counterbalancing the US, and it would genuinely split the world essentially in half. So yeah, RIC, if it comes together, very unlikely, extremely unlikely, but if it happens, then it could genuinely counterbalance the US from a position of slight inferiority. Is the US immune to any threat? No nation is immune to any threat. No superpower is immune to threats. Right? Even the Roman Empire wasn't immune to threats. Even the Maurya Empire wasn't immune to threats. No geopolitical entity is immune entirely to threats.